My family severed ties with me, believing the false accusations made by my cousin regarding an alleged incident involving her. After a decade, they now wish to reconcile. This situation is essentially encapsulated in the title. I feel profoundly lost regarding how to proceed. The resurfacing of old wounds and the rekindling of past anger are overwhelming. To provide some context, I was raised in what could be described as a typical household. My parents worked diligently, but still managed to care for me and my 3 older sisters. While we were never particularly close as a family, we also did not experience any significant conflicts. The same can be said for my extended family, who lived a few hours away. We would gather during summer vacations or Christmas, and our interactions were always pleasant. However, as we matured, we naturally drifted apart, each pursuing our own lives. I am now 31 years old. In 2014, when I was 22 and attending university, I received a phone call from my mother that dramatically altered the course of my life. Initially, I did not answer because I was engaged in a game with friends. However, she called again almost immediately, which was a signal in our family that something serious was happening, akin to a life or death situation. When I finally answered, I was met with chaos on the other end of the line. It sounded as though there was an argument taking place. But once my mother realized I was on the line, she seemed to move to a quieter space. I inquired about what was happening, and I could hear her crying. She essentially inquired if I had anything to confess regarding E, who is my cousin on my mother's side and 7 years my junior, being only 15 at that time. I had not seen E for several years, so I simply replied no and asked for clarification on the matter. Her response was to cry even more intensely, and she began to accuse me of having harmed E during our childhood. She claimed that he had confided in my sister, who then informed both my mother and my aunt. According to her, this incident occurred when he was 9 and I was 16. He had been playing in my room when I entered and allegedly began to touch her under her clothing and kiss her. My mother demanded that I respond, but I was rendered speechless by the sheer absurdity of the situation. I distinctly remember thinking that it must be a terrible joke. The last thing I managed to say was that it was untrue and that he was lying. However, my mother continued to assert that he provided a detailed account of the events, repeatedly asking if I had done it. Each time, I vehemently denied it, shouting no. Ultimately, the conversation concluded with my mother placing me on speakerphone, where both she and my father expressed their desire to sever all ties with me and instructed me never to reach out to them again. Later that day, 2 of my sisters sent me messages, essentially labeling me as disgusting before blocking me. Following that phone call, I found myself taking an unusually long shower, a decision I still cannot comprehend. Once I had calmed down, I began reaching out to everyone I knew, but no one responded. Those who had not yet blocked my number did so promptly. The only reply I received was from my father, who instructed me to cease all contact, stating that they needed time to heal. That incident occurred 9 years ago, and since that day, I have not communicated with any family members. To say that this experience profoundly affected me would be an understatement. For weeks, I existed in a fog, barely eating. And the timing was particularly unfortunate as it coincided with the period leading up to my bachelor's thesis defense, which added to my stress. Fortunately, my co-writer noticed my distress and skillfully guided the conversation, allowing me to handle the easier sections. Without his support, I likely would have failed. Unsurprisingly, no one attended my graduation, marking the beginning of the most challenging phase of my life. During the first year, I lived in constant fear of being arrested for a crime I did not commit. I struggled to find employment and relied solely on my savings. My coping mechanisms included excessive drinking and using oxycodone, which fostered feelings of resentment and aggression. The only reason I did not inflict harm on anyone was due to my isolation. On one occasion, my neighbor called the police after I had shattered a glass in a fit of rage. I managed to convince the officers that I had simply dropped it, and they left since there was no one else in my apartment. But instead of sleeping, I spent my nights consumed with rage, planning ways I could hurt E and make sure no one ever found out. I even thought about doing the things she'd accused me of, only worse. I'm not proud of that. Things didn't start to improve until late 2015, when I landed my first real job in my field. Having something normal to focus on helped. Recovery was slow, but I began drinking less and eventually quit altogether. I've been sober for over 4 years now. Smiling became easier, little by little. I lived cheaply and saved money, which allowed me to treat myself on my birthdays. I'd buy something nice, like a VR headset, a motorcycle, or Lego sets. Last year, I finally moved out of my awful apartment and bought a small house. Owning a home with a garage and a garden had been a lifelong dream, and it gave me a sense of accomplishment. Life is okay now. That said, I still have my struggles. I've been on antidepressants for a few years, and while they help, they don't make me happy. They just keep the darkest thoughts at bay and leave me feeling neutral. My trust in others is practically non-existent. I've tried dating, but have only gone on 2 dates with different women. It's hard to connect when I don't know how to explain my past. What would I say if someone asked about my family? Oh, they accused me of something terrible. We're not speaking anymore, but I didn't do it. Promise. I work in a male-dominated field, so the only woman I talk to regularly is my therapist. She's great, and I value our sessions, but I still struggle to open up. Writing this is hard. I'm not good with words on my best days, and revisiting everything brings it all back. Now, on to my current issue. A few days ago, I got a text from my mother. Seeing her name on my phone felt surreal, and I was too scared to open it right away. I just stared at the notification for hours. Yesterday, she sent another text. The first text I received from my mom said, "Hi, my name. It's been so long since we've talked. We miss you and want to know how you're doing." She wrote about my sisters and how my nieces and nephews are growing up. News to me, as I didn't even know I was an uncle. She ended the message with, "Know that we love you and always will. Mom and Dad." The second text followed shortly after. "Hi, my name. We understand if you don't want to talk to us after everything that happened, but please hear us out. Last month, your name came up at a family gathering. During the conversation, he started downplaying everything that had happened. It got so awkward that she finally admitted nothing ever happened and that she must have dreamt it. We were appalled. When we last spoke, we thought we were protecting E and did what we thought was right at the time. But that's no excuse for how we treated you. What he did was wrong, and we're all angry with her. We've contacted everyone who knew and told them the truth. We want to talk to you, and your sisters would like you to meet their families. Please write back if you can find it in your heart to forgive us. Love, Mom and Dad." So, that's my situation now. I haven't replied, but they probably know I've read the messages. To be honest, this has stirred up so many old wounds and memories that I thought I had buried. Right now, I don't think I can forgive them. I don't trust myself to even be in the same room with them without exploding. A part of me wants to lash out, tell them everything I went through, make them feel the same pain, and maybe even go out of my way to ruin my cousin's life like she did mine. But another part of me just wants to ignore them and move on, keeping my quiet life with my motorcycle and garden as my only company. I don't have friends, and the only people I talk to are coworkers, but we're not close. I reached out to my therapist's clinic, but she's on vacation and won't be available for weeks. I don't want to talk to anyone else, so now I'm here, asking strangers on the internet. What should I do? Should I ignore them and stick to my current life, or should I respond? If I do respond, what do I even say? I know meeting them in person isn't an option right now, but I don't see how revisiting these old ties will improve my life. As embarrassing as it is to admit, I've fantasized about them groveling and apologizing for years, but a text message just feels anticlimactic. My cousin falsely accused me of a heinous act when we were kids, and my family disowned me. Now it's come out that she lied, and my family wants to reconcile. I don't know how to respond or if I even should.